Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone. Come off camera, say hi.
You don't know pressure.
No pressure, of course. I actually am just getting oh my God, Val, this is too real. I'm gonna cry. Val, I love you. Um, I'm just getting over a really bad cold. So I slapped on some concealer and brow gel, and I'm fine. Cough drop is had.
Yeah,
We're getting through this.
I've got a glass of water, but by the time it's gone, my lisp will be like out in full force. Right now, you're seeing a tempered version of it, but brace
Love.
yourselves because it will get wild.
I have my breakfast wine mug, which is
Mm,
full of
very
cold
nice.
and tea. Um, so that's been keeping me going this weekend.
And for some people, it's like dinner time, right?
Yeah, we have people from all over the world. We have people in the UK. There's people from Egypt, Australia. One
Wow.
time I interviewed an author who was living in Australia, so it was like 9 a.m. their time, 9 p.m. my time,
Yep.
which was
Wow.
really an ordeal to orchestrate. But yes,
I
welcome
love it.
everyone. I am Nina. I'm the founder of Sapph-Lit. You know me. And this is Jen Winston, who wrote Greedy, our October nonfiction picks. So everyone say thank you, Jen, for coming. I am so beyond excited. Oh my God, I need to get my book. Hold
Go
on.
ahead. I have plenty if you want an extra. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Yay.
Here she is.
I wish I could sign them. I wish we could do, well, I guess we couldn't do it in person because everyone's international, but
Yeah. No.
someday.
One day. I'd love to have little Sapph-Lit, blue stockings author chat,
Mhm.
but that's just a dream, a pipe dream, if you will.
Keep chasing it. You'll
Keep
get there.
chasing.
Yeah.
So yes, we have Greedy by Jen Winston, which I read in I think 2 days. Um, I absolutely love the book, and I'm so excited to be chatting with you. But for those of you who are not so familiar with Jen, Jen is a writer, creative director, and bisexual living in Brooklyn. She is also now an author, and Greedy, maybe you've heard of it, is her first book. And it came out this past fall. Her work bridges the intersection of sex, technology, and politics. She runs a newsletter called The Bi-Monthly, which I highly recommend you subscribe to. It's full of memes. It's very funny. We love. She's been an underwear model, which is very proudly stated on her website, which again, we love MeUndies. Or no, was it Parade?
It was MeUndies.
It was MeUndies. Okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you. Wow, good memory. That was like the most tangential my career path has ever been, but a highlight for sure.
And she wrote a column for her college paper called The Memeing of Life. My college thesis was called Coming to Conclusions, so I highly appreciate the
Ooh,
pun title
yeah,
moment.
CUMM, I'm just
Of
clarifying.
course.
Okay.
I mean, I wrote it about
Great, great,
bi-language,
great.
which was very on brand for me.
Yeah, love
Um,
that.
and you can follow Jen at Generous on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. So everyone say thank you, Jen, for joining.
Yay, thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So congratulations on your debut. How has the publishing experience been?
Oh God. I mean, oh my God. I mean, it's been hell and like the best thing that's ever happened to me at the same time. I made the very big mistake of agreeing to write and publish this book in less than a year. I got the book deal on October 15th of 2020, and the book came out on October 5th of this year. Which is a timeline that I would not wish on my worst enemy. Like there were a number of reasons that we made that decision, but basically we thought that it could only come out. We wanted it to come out on Bi Visibility Day, so we wanted it to be an even shorter timeline because that's in September. But we thought that it wouldn't really have as much of a market if it came out later in the year, which I think speaks to lack of bi representation and conversation and stuff. And yeah, it was a really hard year. It was the worst year of my life, followed by the best thing that could have possibly happened. Like to look at it, to see you hold it and to like look at it in the finished copy is like so rewarding, but it was awful. And right now I'm like so burnt out. I wish I had saved some of my energy for post it coming out, but I was so like still working to get it to come out because I worked a day job the whole time. Also, I work a like 9 to 5 in marketing. And so then like the book was one thing, but like my career is in marketing. So I was like, I have to at least do that part well. So I like made a bunch of like ads for my publisher to run, like designed a website, like ran an influencer program for it. It was like a ridiculous amount
For
of work.
the marketing team.
I had a marketing team too, but I was like such a perfectionist about it because I wanted to impress my like marketing coworkers, and it just was, yeah. And then like at one point I remember talking to my agent. I wouldn't say this if we weren't in a book club. The best thing about book clubs is I can say like things I wouldn't say on like a podcast. But I remember talking to my agent at one point about the first deadline because I wrote the first draft in 3 months. And my agent I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit that deadline and like make the book good. And my agent was like, oh, you want it to be good? We probably should have negotiated a longer timeline. And I was like, what? Are you kidding? I was like, yeah, I've been wanting to write this book for like 10 years. And my agent was like, oh, yeah, I guess we should have done that. I was like, what did you want me to just put out like a crappy book?
Oh my
And I mean,
God.
I think it, I think a lot of people thought like, because I like have a platform, I like didn't actually care about what I had to say. So that was really frustrating to hear at the thick of the process. But I was a bit of a nightmare to my publisher, and like they sent me back the fully copy edited manuscript. Like you're not supposed to have any changes at that point. And I rewrote like the whole thing. Like at that point there was like a 25-page FAQ at the beginning, and I like deleted it, and I made 18,000 changes according to the track changes.
Wow.
So they were obviously furious, but I was like, what are you gonna do? Like you can't not like what are you gonna do? It's my book. And I mean, I'm really grateful that my publishing team like rolled with the punches and agreed that everything was like that was the better idea. But it was
what a roller coaster.
It was awful.
Well, what do you think?
And like, yeah.
No, go
ahead. No, go ahead. I was just going to keep rambling.
What do you think the biggest difference between that final copy edited like version that you made 18,000 changes to and the one that is in our hands?
Fewer adverbs. You know, like a lot of like technical language stuff. I even made a bunch of changes after the advanced reader version, which I have right here. You can tell it because it has papyrus on the spine, which like I never approved and would never have approved. Even for like a galley that only press is gonna see. But I made it like 5,000 changes to that version. But I made it a lot shorter. And I think the biggest change is probably that FAQ. Like it began with a bunch of questions about bisexuality. Like the second chapter or prologue, which is now called What I Talk About When I Talk About Bisexuality. It was like a bisexuality 101, just complete chapter. And a few of my friends read it because I didn't really have time to like share it out to my friends. But they read it and they were like, this kind of slows it down. Like I didn't realize it was going to be a memoir. And I was like, oh, that's very important for people to get. So I restructured it a lot. And I took a lot of that information throughout, but every so often I'll realize something that I didn't end up getting back in the book from that part.
Yeah. I mean, I think keeping it to that memoir style was what made it very relatable, which kind of goes into my next question. So I related to your coming out experience a lot, and I'm sure that you've heard that time and time again, but there are like really strange parallels. Specifically, I didn't necessarily come out later in life. I came out when I was 22, but I did so in an Instagram post during Pride that I posted 10 minutes after FaceTiming my family members telling them the good news. So like very similar.
Yeah.
I was so I started feeling attraction towards homophobia and biphobia was real. And it wasn't until I got to college as a very, very straight gender and sexuality studies major, and had what you labeled a malignant girl crush with one of my best friends and her for me, that I eventually had my bisexual awakening. But I kept falling into relationships with men even after that. And it felt easier. I didn't have to challenge myself and confront that part of my identity that I once was terrified of, but still so desperate to explore. So, subsequently, because of that, there have been times that I question myself, feel invalid in my identity, and ultimately feel very confused. So, I guess with all of that, my question for you is bisexual to bisexual. Is there a way to find validation in that and pleasure in that confusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I hope people take away from the book is that there's this big dialogue in like bisexual activism that by people should be like myth busting, or like that comes up a lot. I sold this book on proposal, and the proposal had like an overview about the word greedy and how it's on like every list of bisexual stereotypes. And so I think as bi people, we often think we have to do the opposite of these stereotypes. And confusion is a big one. If confused were a better, snappier title, that's absolutely what I would have called the book, because to me, that's the word that I really wanted to reclaim and like find the meaning in, because I ultimately found that being confused is like such a beautiful thing. And like, thank God I'm not just taking everything for granted as it's presented to me, like not just accepting anything, gender, any binary anymore. And I think bisexuality really gave me the tools to do that, and bisexual confusion specifically. But I also think it's really hard when you're almost like content, when you don't have the lack of attraction to one gender, or like to the gender that would make you straight. It's really difficult to be like, oh, I'm queer, because so often queer people are like, well, that's not me, so this must be me. And I'm really interested in the idea of monosexuality and how it like shows us that even that is like us not really questioning ourselves as much as it could be, like it's us falling into another box. Like monosexuality suggests that like gay and lesbian and straight sexualities are somehow like more valid. And it's a harmful system, even though we don't like think about it very much. So that was a huge part of my struggle. I like obviously relate to what you just said. And when people say that they relate to my book, it's like really validating for me, because I'm still like, was this worth talking about? Like, was it worth saying out loud? So thank you for saying that. And then there was something else you touched on that I wanted to, oh, the girl crush. So that was an essay that I completely rewrote after the copy editing phase, literally the night before it was due. It was not a like medical theme before it. And my editor was like, what the hell did you do? I like think I like it. But I did that because I had two essays in the second person. The very first essay and the essay where I meet my partner, and they were both in the you tense. And which I love writing in that tense, because it's really immersive, or that point of view, because it's really immersive and like makes the reader feel like they're in it. One of my favorite memoirs, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, which I like assume a lot of people on the call are aware of or have read. It's all in the second person and you almost don't even notice it, but it's really beautifully done. And I wanted to kind of draw those parallels between when I wasn't like having a sexual encounter that like I wasn't queer, or I was queer, but I was questioning my queerness, versus one where I was, excuse me, finally feeling secure. And this is what I did a podcast earlier, so this is what I get for talking a bunch today.
Yes, hydrate.
1 second. But I wanted that girl crush chapter was originally also written in the U tense, and I didn't want it to like be a third element in there, so I had to redo it.
Yeah.
So I just like completely rewrote it. I was like texting my friend who's a doctor, like, give me medical terms, like
Oh my God.
at like midnight. So yeah.
That leads into my next question, because your collection varies so widely in format and, text style, which made it really engaging for me. You have Girl Crush, which is like a medical study, or like psychologist notes and observations. And then Bisexuality in Men, a retrospective, is emails back and forth with your friend. So can you talk about your decision to choose non-traditional essay format? Was this easier for some essays versus others?
Yeah. Also, just before I get into that, anyone's welcome to tweet anything I say all the time. So you have my complete consent to share, except for the thing that I said about my agent. Please.
You want us to cut that out of the recording?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. Because it will be posted on Instagram.
She won't watch it.
Okay, cool.
If she does, thank you, Wendy. And I wish that we had more time as well. But yeah, also she's a great agent, and I hope she knows I think that. But that was a moment of like, oh shit. But and now I lost track of your question. Oh, format. Yeah. So I blame that on my ADHD, which in the press tour that I've been like doing for this book, I found that bisexual people with ADHD is like, that's like a thing. And I need somebody to do a clinical study on it, because it's like, it trends higher, I'm certain.
I have many friends who are bisexuals with ADHD, so I will give subjects for your study.
Okay, great. Maybe that should be my next move. But really I just like, I prefer books with a lot of sex and with a lot of different like styles and formats. And I like when even memoirs, when each chapter feels different and unique and like self-contained. And so I've always written personal essays, and it's hard to find like a place to put personal essays when you really like, I've tried to write fiction. I probably will try again now after this, but I've never been as good at it as I've felt when I'm writing personal essays. But it's hard to get ones that are like experimental-ish in nature. Like it's hard to get them published anywhere. So retrospective.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, I think we're good, right?
Yeah.
The Bisexuality in Men was written in that dynamic because I wanted to reinforce that Ben and I were friends now. And I felt like that wouldn't really be believable if I had just written it in essay format. Like I felt like if I'd written it in like an immersive experience of the time, you might like wonder if like if it had actually, like if I was lying to myself or something like that. And I wrote those emails. They're not like direct lift from Gmail, but Ben like basically co-wrote them, like signed off on everything I was like writing under his voice.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. How did you, for the essays that were about other people, like your chapter about Brinley, or the girl crushes and your high school friends. What was that process like of asking for their permission or not asking for permission, deciding who made the cut, deciding who to talk about? What was, because it's so personal and it in times is so revealing. So what was that like for you and for them?
Yeah, I mean, consent like throughout this was just really complicated, especially to do in under a year. Like
Yeah.
My publisher told me I didn't need to get consent of anyone I quoted, like sources I quoted, or like authors, or even like people's whose Instagram posts I quoted and whatnot. But I was like, I know these people, and it would be weird if I don't ask them if I can include them in my book. But I wrestled with that for a while because they were like, you don't need to. And I was like, but I want to. And they were like, but you probably shouldn't because like we don't really have time. And I was like, but I like should. So that was super weird. And I'm sure that I missed getting like permission from some of the people whose like books and resources I cite. I also probably could have gone a bit more in depth if I had had more time and like done interviews or like gotten specific quotes from those people just for the book. But yeah. As far as like the characters, so several names are changed. The girl crush Sloane's name is changed. All the high school friends' names are changed, but we keep in touch and talk regularly. I probably would not have included, I would have had a much harder time including even a chapter about Sloane, like if I thought that Sloane was going to read it. But she has made it very clear that she has no interest in reading it for a long time. She like sent me a congratulations text, but like for a long time she had said she wouldn't read it. So I felt comfortable saying that. I have no idea if that's true. And two of those friends are like hanging out soon. And I'm like so worried because I know that one of them is going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I know Lainey, and I actually forget what one of their other like fake names was. The one who was like gonna get into an Ivy. I forget what I named her. But I know they're like talking about it a lot, like behind my back right now. And that's a super weird thing too, is like people who weren't aware of what all the text was, like if they're not like, oh my God, congratulations, I loved your book. You're like, what are they thinking? But then it's just, there's not time to process it. So that's helpful. I did let Lainey read the chapter about us. That's like a very questionably consensual and like encounter. The hot tub chapter. Cause I wanted, that felt too personal to share without like somebody else's consent. And so I did that, but names I didn't change: Ben, Joey, Brinley, Eden, Jamie, and I think that might be it. But all of them had to read the chapters that they were in and sign legal forms. So yeah, very special. And that was kind of complicated, but I had no fear that any of them would.
Good. So you said earlier that this book was validating for you to write, and I can imagine how that process is like very self-reflective and self-transformational. Like writing an entire personal memoir is, you have to go really deep. And I'm wondering how the reception of it has impacted that validation. So like, can you talk a bit about how that's impacted your validation of your sexuality, of yourself, of your experiences?
Probably the coolest thing that's come out of it is been like, several people have been like, I masturbate the same way as you do. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know that would, like, that's been the most validating thing for sure. But I love that. but I mean, it's a lot of people have messaged me weirdly the exact same message where they've said, I haven't had a unique experience in my life.
Never. No unique experiences here.
Yeah. Which it's funny that multiple people have sent that, but I think that it speaks to the fact that like there aren't many overtly bisexual stories out there. Like there are a lot that are like subtly bisexual, or it's like, you know, something that like if it's mentioned like casually, which is fine with me. Like I believe that it needs to be mentioned, but I wanted this to be like so on the nose that I wanted it to be something that like if you were wondering if you were bi, you could pick it up and learn about what it was like for me. And maybe that would help you understand that even if you weren't sure of everything, you could still claim this identity.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a lot of what a lot of what I learned throughout the writing process was from doing so much research, which was another thing I didn't account for in the 3 months. I had to do so much research, like even just for random references. Like if I referenced a movie when I'm in the like early 2000s, it had to be like a movie that was like popular in the early 2000s. And it was just very difficult. But something that made me that I learned throughout the book was like really being able to get comfortable with that confusion and to not see that as a bad thing. And I think I knew that going into it, but it was totally something that came about for me while writing. I was like, oh, this has always been present and has always been around in my life. This was the 5th book proposal I'd written, I think. I've been trying to write a book of personal essays for such a long time. And in the past, they were all like books about, like they were books with a collection of sex essays, basically, some of which are still in this book. But it was always just sex with men. And they almost always ended by me being like, I'm bi. And like, that was the end of the book, which is, I mean, it's sort of how this book ends with gender, but hopefully the theme feels a bit more tied to it. I thought when I first set out to write this book, I was like, oh, I'm going to have trouble integrating bisexuality into all these straight experiences. But it soon became very clear that I have been bi the whole time, and that
it's already integrated.
Yeah, and that was really amazing to like come about while I was writing.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love looking back at memories or like experiences where at the time I was very straight presenting to myself and to others. But it's like, no, there was a little bi baby in there, and she had her way no matter what.
Yeah, totally.
So one of my favorite chapters was your chapter about going to gay bars and having that be a part of your queer experiences. So bars specifically for queer women are few and far between. And often queer women find queer community at gay bars and clubs. In your essay, Cuffed Jeans and Feeling Seen, you talk about how queer bars give structure to queer communities, that they're responsible for queer existence, which was one of the most like mind, like blown moments for me, where I was like, oh yeah. And then in Out of the Woods, you explain femme invisibility, saying that queer women who present as femme often are rendered invisible in queer spaces, overlooked and invalidated. With these two truths in mind, how can queer women, especially femme queer women and women who date men, feel comfortable taking up space in gay bars and clubs? Is there a way to be bi in a gay bar?
That's a great question that I do not know the answer to, because I have failed miserably at being bi in a gay bar several times. Yeah, I am glad that revelation, or that revelation that I had like hit you as a revelation, because I was like, what, when I like got there while I was writing. I rewrote that first chapter, the cuff jeans and feeling seen, so many times, circling what I was trying to say. And like, that's what I was trying to say, was that because there are no bisexual bars, bisexual people don't really exist. And I know that's a kind of ridiculous thing to say, because obviously like that, like alcoholic tendencies of or like the partying tendencies of a community should not define that community, is what I meant to say. But yeah, I was really struck by that quote mentioned in that chapter by Harry Britt, I believe, that talks about how gay bars give structure to queer communities, literally putting those communities on the map. And like, bi people just don't have that. And so I also didn't personally resonate or feel comfortable in lesbian bars. But sort of the intent of the Out of the Woods chapter was also to highlight the significant privileges I still have while feeling that uncomfortable, and just how those privileges also were part of what made me feel uncomfortable, which in a kind of like unique circular way. And now I think I've strayed from your question. Is there a way to be bi in a gay bar?
Yeah.
I would argue that it's hard, but I think that what needs to happen is like more bi and multisexual spaces need to exist.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason I just was like on the pod, or it will be coming out soon, the podcast Diking Out, which is a great podcast. We had an awesome conversation about whether bisexual women could bring male partners to lesbian bars. And I was sort of like, no, because I don't know, there's something sapphic about those spaces that I like. And also just, I don't know, having men in those spaces feels violent. And I think you can be, at times, not always, but I think you can be conscious of that. And also, like, I think you have to be conscious of that, I guess, as a bi person, because it's not necessarily like by privilege to be dating a man. Like, that's a whole issue that people think that bi people who are in hetero presenting relationships are experiencing privilege, because maybe we're experiencing some privileges of heterosexuality, but we're also like being seen as invisible, or we're not being seen, we're being erased, and we're also being closeted, which is not great for bi mental health. But I think there has to be like a core knowledge of the value of queer bars for women and femme people as like safe spaces, because that's so integral to their existence.
I think there should be a bi bar called bi-fi, which is my favorite term that came out of your book, and I circled it 5 times.
I put that in at the copy editing phase too, by the way.
Love it.
An 11th hour edition.
Perfect edition. Yeah, I think having a bi space would be like, it's not something that I've ever really thought of before, because I mean, it's never existed, but it makes so much sense. And I think because isn't bisexuality like the most common queer identity?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, like, statistics on this will like fluctuate, but I believe it's like 3%. I don't know. I'm not going to say a wrong statistic because it changes all the time, but it is the most common LGBTQ plus identity. And I think it's just always been seen like there are places for us to go. We can go to straight bars if we are wanting to be that way, or we can go to gay bars if we're wanting that. But there's nowhere for us to be fully ourselves. And that, although there is actually a bisexual bar in Brooklyn. You probably know of this bar, but you may not have known it was a bisexual bar. It's called Mood Ring.
Mood Ring is bisexual?
Yeah. Okay. That's how I felt. I was like, wait, that's my favorite bar. And it makes a lot of sense.
Right there, like right that way.
Yeah. It's, I mean, when you put it together, it makes a lot of sense, but they have like They have like cool bisexual merch on their website and stuff. I tried to have a book launch party there, but like my publisher wouldn't pay for it because it's COVID, so it's fine. It was for the best. It was for the best. But yeah, I think also the bi-monthly, my newsletter, that title originally came from Ben, my friend Ben, and I were going to have a like we were going to launch a bi event series, and that's what we were going to call it. But we were so in our heads about what it would look like, and it was really hard to imagine because it really didn't exist. And we were like, how do we make it clear that it's bisexual, but also not be too on the nose with it, like in a way that's like annoying to people who are just like trying to party. And I think that question of like, what does it look like? And like, what's that balance came up so much. Like, even with the cover of this book, like, it was so challenging to come up with a cover that I felt like spoke to the bisexual community, but didn't have the flag on it and didn't like sexualize queer women. A lot of like the original concepts I saw, like kind of sexualized queer women in a way I was uncomfortable with, and also didn't really align with my experience because like I wasn't like great at being a sexually active queer woman. So I was like, this feels counter to what I'm trying to say. But I like hired a designer who I thought was up for this challenge. And like, it was because it was a really hard design brief, and I'm really happy with where we netted out, because I love how it's kind of hard to read, and it like is almost confused in itself. So
yeah, I love it.
oh,
And I love like the subtle like nod to the bi flag here.
I never noticed that. You're right. You're right. The thing I liked about it is it's like a rainbow, but like not.
Yeah,
there's something
it's
about
like
the brown.
aesthetically like mid-century modern off rainbow.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I mean, that was really hard. Because I made so many like inspiration decks with like photos of lemon bars and like cuff jeans, and like it was interesting because I was talking to Rodrigo about cuff jeans, and Rodrigo's a designer, and he was like, I'm straight and I'm wearing cuff jeans right now. And I was like, exactly, like it's all we have, but it's also not ours. And so it doesn't really like work fully. And yes, I did have a straight designer, which, but he's amazing. He's so amazing. And he was so.
Into my next question. And I loved how you were talking about bisexual stereotypes and how there is no unique experience, yet the things that are considered bisexual stereotypes can apply to anyone. Yet we cling on to them for some like sort of validation and sense of identity. So I'd like to know, what are your most accurate bisexual stereotypes? Because for me, I personally can't sit in chairs. I love a sweater vest, and I throw up peace signs in every single photo that I take. So
is that one? Wow, I do that too.
Yeah.
Here you go. You can screenshot for that. Yeah. Also the finger guns. I do that, which is like bisexuals and like dads as categories. Like that's us. Let's see. I mean, if ADHD counts as a bisexual stereotype at this point, like that one. I'm literally playing. If you're like, what are her hands doing? I don't know if you can tell. But I'm playing with this like thinking putty that I like have to play with, or else I'm just gonna lose my like train of thought constantly. But which I am right now by stereotypes. Okay, yeah, I can't sit in chairs properly. It's something people have commented on throughout my life. Like even when I'm driving a car, I like drive like this.
Oh yeah, I do too.
But people have been like, wow, Jen really knows how to get comfortable in a car. So there's that. Cuff jeans, also like the jeans are cuffed or the khakis are cuffed. And then I think something I've been doing recently is like, this nose ring is fake, but I bought a bunch of them to just leave by but like a bunch of the like fake ones to like leave by my computer so I can put them in when I have Zoom calls. When I need like feel more queer, because it helps.
Exactly.
It really
Yeah.
helps.
I mean, literally like
Yeah.
at its finest.
I think a lot of times bi people, we have, or at least it's helped me to have these like external things to like hold on to. Like even my book, sometimes I look at it and I'm like, yep, you're a queer person. That's who you are. Because it's like something I did and put out into the world. The first chapter, the story to ease the author's imposter syndrome, I wrote that because halfway through the book, I started to think that I didn't deserve to write the book, because I was like, you're like, I had been writing so many of the chapters about dating men, and I was like, this is embarrassing. You don't have enough stuff to talk about hooking up with like women or other genders. Like you're not like queer enough to do this. And then I was like, wait, I think that's part of what I'm trying to fight here. And so I wrote that like as a thing for myself to hear while I was writing it, because that type of imposter syndrome happens all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a reaction or comment from a reader of Greedy that stood out to you?
Um, Oh my God, I'm sure there are. Well, somebody told me that they had like the book inspired them to come out. I've heard that a few times, and that's like amazing. And not that I want to push anyone to come out before they're ready or anything, but for me, I had no idea how much coming out would help my would just be amazing for me. Like I didn't know that it would really make me feel like a whole person. And I just wanted to let people know that, because a lot of times as bi people, we don't want to come out unless there's like a reason.
Yeah.
I guess as queer people in general, that's a thing. You kind of don't want to come out until you have some like
Proof of it.
reason that pushes you. Yeah. Or like until you're dating someone and you have to like tell people in your life about it. And I like couldn't make anyone date me. So I was like, I have no reason to come out about this. Like I might as well keep dating these guys. But yeah, that's been really amazing. A lot of people have sent photos of the book with their cats, which is like the
Yes.
queerest thing ever, and I love it.
A lot of those on Sapph-Lit, a lot of Instagram posts with our monthly
Yeah,
book.
maybe it was all of you. And I think hearing that people masturbate the same way was like probably the most standout, because I was like not expecting that. Like,
thank you for sharing that you're also considering yourself freaky.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I've never really talked to anyone who like did that the same way. So that felt really good. And I truly have not talked to this many bisexual people like in my life as I have since the book came out. But like I'm getting all these DMs from bi people, which is just amazing.
The same thing has happened since I started Sapph-Lit. Like I'll get a random DM that's just like the nicest message that could have ever been penned in the history of messages. And I just like burst into tears. So if anyone in this call has sent me a DM, you've definitely made me cry. So thank you.
Yeah.
Love that.
Well, you started a really meaningful community, and I think that's like so important. Like a lot of people who I've talked to about the idea of bi community, they've said that they found most of their bi community in support groups, which I found really interesting. And I think it goes back to the idea of like not many bi bars. But it is such a like queer thing. Like you have to talk about your experience, and it might be like cheesy. I think that's why a lot of like TV writers don't write characters to name themselves as bisexual, because it's like boring to like be like, I'm bisexual. Like it's not like sex. It's not as sexy as like I cheated on you with someone of another gender. It's like that's like how to write good TV. But to be like, I'm bisexual and this is what it means to me is like such an important conversation. So and also I know not everyone on this call is bisexual, but to have a just group where you can talk about like queer experiences and engage with them in like book form is amazing.
Definitely agreed. Is there anything that's happened in pop culture since writing this book that you wish you could write an essay about or include?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah, well, part of the reason I wrote it so quickly is because I thought there was a lot of momentum around like bisexual experiences. Like people are starting to figure out how to do it right. And I wanted to make sure that the stuff I was writing wasn't completely out of date. Although then I like took a breath and after the book was done and I was like, oh, it hasn't really gotten that much better. But I think when asked about like good bisexual representation, I always point to the show Generation on HBO.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone's watching it, but it's apparently was canceled, which like broke my heart. I like can't even process it.
Yeah.
It was such a great show, but I thought they had really great messy bisexual representation on that show, where they called it out overtly, and they also didn't make their bi character like, you know, perfect. Like they didn't make it was a bisexual man, and they didn't make him like not conform to any of these uh stereotypes. Like he was a complete mess, like, yeah. And it was fine. You know, it wasn't because he was bisexual. It was just like he was a complicated character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I need to watch that. I remember when it got canceled and the entire internet like went up in flames.
Yeah, it's
people were very upset. Kind of like Sense8. Like people,
yeah, which I haven't seen. I need to watch that.
Like smaller queer communities will align themselves with these like indie TV shows that like are so important to them, and then they just get kaput.
And yeah, they don't even, the networks like don't even know what it means to us.
Yeah.
And yeah, very sad. Pour one out.
So we have an extension of Sapph-Lit called Sapph-Lit Writers, just for sapphic writers who want to be held accountable, find writing buddies, just chat, share their work.
Awesome.
And are there any little words of wisdom that you might have for that community?
Yes. Well, I would say if you are trying to debate whether or not you should tell your story, if you want to write a memoir, that you should, and that people want to hear your story, and that you telling your story is not taking up too much space. Because I wrestled with that a lot in terms of writing a memoir, but ultimately I wanted to speak from my experiences and make it very clear that that's what I was speaking from, and not speak on behalf of the whole community. So it actually was pretty great. And then my other thing is like, keep writing. I pulled from so many things that I had written years prior to make this book happen. Like the dating and walking chapter, I think was the first essay I ever worked on when I first, or it was one of the first. When I first moved to New York, I was writing about it like as it was happening in a writing workshop at like Gotham Writers Workshop. And I mean, a lot of this book came out of Gotham Writers Workshop, which is funny because it gets a bad rap. But I mean, it's beautiful to have a writing group where certain things can be said, where you don't have to like question them. Like you don't have to defend yourself for writing about queerness, and you don't have to defend yourself around that. So I think it's great to have a like-minded community of writers. Yeah. But I also learned a lot from, I hired an early editor, like to look at my book before it went to my editor at my publisher. And she is straight, and she like lovingly played devil's advocate to a lot of things in the book. And it really pushed me to think harder. Like when I had that big FAQ in the beginning about I had a bunch of stats about the bi community, like the stat that bisexual women experience sexual assault at a higher rate than lesbian women or straight women. And she was like, why do you think that is? And no one had like asked me that. And I also couldn't really like find it anywhere, because for a lot of communities, when you hear a stat presented about your about identity, it's not really like clarified as like it's presented in correlation form, not in causation form, because we're expected to know the causation. But with the bi community, like bi erasure is so strong that we don't always know why bisexuality is causing something like this. And so I had a lot of trouble with that. And that kind of inspired me to write like essays like the hot tub one about the power dynamic, or that's what it's called, the power dynamic. But it inspired me to write essays like that, where I'm trying to figure out what the link between those things are. And then also to question the idea that bisexuality doesn't feel like it's like enough to, it doesn't feel like it's a big enough deal to like lead to experiences like that. So I would say find readers who are critical of your work and push you to think deeper about it, because it can help you see what needs to show up on the page. And yeah, keep writing. Like, good for you. I can't write right now at all.
So you're still recovering.
I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have made it to the rapid fire round.
Oh,
and
yes.
Before we get into this, for everyone on the call, if you have questions for Jen, put them in the chat and we can ask them when we're done with this round. Okay, so first thing that comes to mind, what are you currently reading?
I'm reading Open by Rachel Krantz. It's a memoir that comes out in January. It's like fucking incredible. It's so good. And it's like I thought my book had a lot of sex in it. Like, we met through this first time author Slack. So I'm reading like The Galley, which is like a thing I get to say now that I'm an author. But I'm reading The Galley. And I'm like, holy shit, like we've been like friends, and I like for like a little while now, and I'm like, wow, you have like some wild experiences. But I really am loving it, and I'm learning a lot about polyamory and non-monogamy, because she brilliantly like weaves together all these things of like how non-monogamy is read in the world and received, and also like all these sexual experiences that she had and what they meant. So it's really great.
I saw that on your Instagram story and I screenshotted it so I could
Yay, yeah. I'll have her. I'm wondering actually if she would want to speak or be able to come speak here, because so the book talks about queer experiences a lot, but she and I had a conversation about what it means. Like, I mean, there's a chapter in the book called Am I Bisexual? And she talks about that throughout the book. So, I mean, it's definitely, in my eyes, it's a queer book in terms of queer relationships, and she's queer, but she's like starting to embrace that. So,
yeah, we can talk after.
Yeah, we'll talk after. I'm not trying to like tell you Rachel Krantz's sexuality, but it's an amazing book. So good.
Do you have a book that you recommend everyone should read?
Yes, I have two. Well, the first would be In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And that's a memoir about abuse in queer relationships. And it just is so beautifully written and opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then the other is Females by Andrea Longshoe, which is quoted several times throughout my book. It's a super controversial book because of kind of it's like a manifesto type short read. I think I have it. All my book. I promise you guys that I have books, but they're not behind me, which is annoying.
It looks like a wine rack.
It was here when we moved into our apartment. Oh, here's Females. Yeah,
it's short. Yeah,
it's short, and I mean, I just found it really illuminating about thinking about gender in like a philosophical way. But yeah, also Andrea Longshoe is now the book critic for Vulture, and she just wrote like a scathing review of Maggie Nelson's new book, which like I was like, whoa, like the audacity. So I also like am a huge Maggie Nelson fan, but yeah, I loved like my pretentiousness felt like it was also being like hurt by that. So I love Andrea Longshoe's like just ability to go for the jugular.
Oh, completely. I think I saw that headline somewhere because I have Maggie Nelson's new book. We're reading The Argonauts next month.
Oh, great.
Well,
That's an amazing book. Yeah.
so good. Okay. Did you take up a unusual quarantine activity?
Oil painting. This is a partially finished oil painting.
Oh, cool.
It's not good. You don't have to compliment me. But I put it's mainly here so I don't forget to finish it, although that's like an ADHD thing, like you have to keep it in view.
Yeah.
But it hasn't really worked. But yeah, in the beginning I oil painted myself, like flashing the camera, which I loved. And I was like, I should do like weird still lifes and stuff, but I haven't had a chance because of the book, but I want to get back into it. It's very calming.
Yeah, painting is great. If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
I don't know. This one's so hard always. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think like what should I just who would I want to talk to? I mean, maybe Sherry Eisner, who I quote throughout the book, who's a bisexual theorist and activist, but like we've been emailing like since the book came out. So it's weird when that is like almost available. I'm like, should I pick someone else? But Sherry's been such an icon of mine. And actually, I heard before this call that next month you're having Tori Peters potentially.
Yes, surprise to everyone.
Oh shoot, sorry. Well, that would be one too. She would definitely be one. So her book.
Yeah. Sorry, spoiler alert to everyone.
Sorry.
Tori Peters agreed to come chat with us about detransition baby. So, and I was going to announce that on this call, so you didn't spoil too much, Jen.
Okay, good. Well, I took it from you. I'm sorry. That's very exciting. That's another book I would recommend that like everybody read. I learned so much from it, and it's just like the gold standard for fiction for me at this point. It's like so well written and hilarious. So good.
Do you have a favorite bisexual movie? Or TV show?
I don't think this is like actually my answer because I don't know that I really liked this movie. But the first thing that comes to mind is Titane. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's the new movie. I'm gonna forget the director's name, but it's the new movie, the director of Raw, and it's like a very interesting like gender play film. I don't know that I liked it. Somebody says they're going to see it. I don't know that I liked it, but like I don't know why it came to mind. But it did. Let's see. I'm sure there's something else. I'm supposed to answer fast. I'm looking at my books. Let's see. I don't know. One of my favorite bisexual characters is probably Kalinda Sharma on The Good Wife. I think my book mentions this, but I just love that she's such a mess, and I love messy bisexual characters all the time.
Absolutely. Love that. Do you have a favorite bisexual musician?
Lou Reed, who I just found out was bisexual. I just watched
bisexual?
Yeah, I had no idea. I found out from the Velvet Underground documentary.
Oh yeah, I need to watch that.
Really
I know
good.
it came out. Favorite bisexual celebrity now?
Like I guess Megan Fox. Like I'm really enjoying seeing Megan Fox like get comfortable being on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
And it's like just provided endless entertainment. And
Kelly, all of those captions are like their own little
memes. They really are. Although she's not a great answer actually, because she's said a lot of biphobic things in the past. Stephanie Beatrice has done a lot of amazing work for the bi community, and I felt like so lucky to get to do this earlier this year. But I got to work with Most, which is like Netflix's queer division, and I got to write a script for Stephanie to read about bisexual myth busting. So that was amazing.
Love that.
Yeah, she's the best, and she's like fought for the word bisexual to be in the scripts of the characters that she uses. Yeah. Megan Fox to like laugh at and like look at, I guess. And then also Stephanie Beatrice for like profound bisexual commentary and leadership.
Amazing. Do you have a favorite bisexual content creator? Because besides you, mine is Haley Jacobson.
Oh, Haley is amazing.
Yeah.
I also I love Haley Jacobson, and I also love Gab Alexa, who also talks about polyamory a lot, and the intersection of Blackness and bisexuality, which from doing research for my book, like there is not a lot of intersectional data about bi people, and it's like a huge problem, and there aren't a lot of like intersectional bi stories that get told or get celebrated. Also in my newsletter, every month I plug a bisexual to follow. And I would recommend following Shiri Eisner and Robin Oakes on Twitter, because they're both like founding bisexual activists, by which I mean they've just been doing this work for a really long time, and I learned so much from them all the time.
Yeah. Good recommendations. Okay, so rapid fire over. We are now on to community questions. So these are going to be the ones that have been proposed in our app, and then we're going to go to the Zoom chat. So, alrighty.
I realize I've been rambling too long, but so like, but okay, I'll try to keep these slightly short so we can get through everything.
So Nikki asked, what kind of self-growth or internal questioning did you have to go through as you wrote your book? Are there still parts of your experience that you think you're still trying to understand or work through?
Yeah, I think writing the book itself was like the biggest personal, basically it was like 3 months of like doing therapy on yourself. Like I was like, what was I thinking here? What was my motivation here? And sometimes it was really hard to figure out like what my motivation was for certain things that I did. I was like, why would I do that? Like, why would then I had to think of myself as a character. Like, why would this character do that? And that was really interesting. But I think, I think the biggest thing that came out of the book for me is like, now I feel like I'm actually queer, and I don't have to question that on a daily basis. And part of that is my relationship, which I'm really grateful for. But I also know that I don't think I would have gotten the book deal to write this book if I were in a relationship with a man, or in a relationship with a woman, or not in a relationship. Like, I think the fact that I was dating a trans non-binary person was really like critical to me getting this book deal, which I think is like really fucked up, and like speaks to the type of bi representation we want to see. And I think that's a big problem. So I learned that I have like another like strange type of bi privilege through that lens, by writing this book. Yeah.
Yeah, that actually leads into Shelby's question. Because Shelby said in an interview, you said you didn't think this book would be published if you were in a relationship with a man at the time of it being published. And Shelby said, as a bi girl, I felt this very hard because we are invalidated in relationships with men. But you also say this book wouldn't have happened if you were with a woman. So can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yeah, I think maybe it could have happened if I was with a woman. That's like maybe. But it definitely helped that and my partner and I have talked about this like at length. They're very aware. They were like, I'm so glad I got you this book deal. Like they're like always joking about it. But I think that if I was with a woman, I mean, yeah, I think it would have been okay. But me being with a trans non-binary person helps debunk the idea that bisexuality is just about like being attracted to men and women, which for me is a huge like stigma that made me not want to come out, because I was like, I don't want my sexuality to invalidate anyone else's identity. Like that's absolutely not what I want. And then pansexuality as a term just didn't like sit right with me. No offense to anyone who uses it. Like I love pansexual people and all multisexual people I like relate to. But bisexuality just always felt right to me, that term. And I think I think it took away any of that hesitation from like editors looking at the proposal.
Yeah. Okay, that does make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Emma asked, what was one of the most difficult aspects of writing the book?
The timeline. It was really hard to do it on that timeline. That was definitely it. And then I think some of the chapters about sexual assault, I thought I would be more prepared to write than I was. And to do them on such a tight timeline was really hard because I had to like dig really deep and then like turn around and be funny on the next day. And I also had a day job while I was doing this, as I mentioned. So that was a hard part, like writing about something so traumatizing and then showing up to a meeting and like being like, hey everyone, like, yeah, exactly. And I think it was hard. Like I ended up having to like grieve and process a lot as I was going through. And it was just really hard to like switch. And another thing was like my relationship. It was really hard to like be a good partner throughout the course of writing this. And I mean, it was really hard. We're still like recovering because me working a full-time job and like running an Instagram and like writing a book is like I should never have agreed to that timeline. But I wanted to write a book so badly. And I guess that's also something I learned is like trust that you can take your time a little bit, like and you'll still have a story to tell in a year. Like I was so worried that my story wouldn't matter anymore. But I'm glad it's over because I'm glad I'm not still in it. Like, thank God. But it was really hard, and self-care is so important and rest is so important, especially as a writer, to like process. Like,
yeah. No, I think that's a very well-rounded answer for that.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about like the content of the book. It's about the process of like putting out a book that fast and how it affects all aspects of your life.
Yeah. And the other thing that was hard about it was the research. I had not prepared for that much at all.
Okay, I'm going to go to the chat, and Nick asked, do you have any advice for baby bisexual you and other baby bisexuals?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of wrote this whole book as a letter to baby bisexual Jen, like almost pre-out Jen. And that like when I was picturing my ideal read, that's who I was picturing, because I really would have loved a book like this that made me just feel confident to be bisexual out loud. Like I felt shut down by it every time I tried to talk about it, even with my therapist, I would bring it up and she'd be like, okay, like let's not focus on that. Like I think she just thought it was a phase or wasn't important or something like that. But my advice would just be to like keep remembering that you are valid, as like internety as it sounds, and you deserve to be around people who make you feel validated. And that was something that was also hard for me to learn, was like I should be around people who trust and respect my bisexuality. And like, yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, so Katerina asks, do you have any book recs on gender/gender norms? And Emma has the same question for book recommendations on learning more about bisexuality.
Oh, yes. Okay, well, this is my bisexual shelf. As you can, wait, let me see. Yeah, as you can see, there I am. Great. But let me see. So I would recommend first and foremost Shiri Eisner's book, by Notes for a Bisexual Revolution. It is basically queer theory, but I learned so much from it and it was really helpful. And then I would also recommend Life Isn't Binary by Meg John Barker and Alex Ian Toffey. It's like a kind of academic book about different ways that binaries don't exist. And the first chapter is about sexualities. And I like relied on this book a lot. And it inspired me to write about like platonic love and other types of love beyond romantic love. Because in this, they bust the myth that that love is binary, or like love is just romantic or not. And they talk about all these different types of love. So I really recommend that book. As far as gender roles and gender norms, again, gonna plug females because I think that it was really helpful for me in terms of thinking about like femininity and what it means to like in the experience of a trans woman, as well as like just in general, and like radical feminine politics. Like the whole book is kind of written based off of Valerie Solanas, who wrote the Scum Manifesto,
Yes.
and who also famously shot Andy Warhol. It's yeah, like, but also like, I don't know, her heart was like in the right place, I guess. In that she was like a radical feminist, and
Very much so, yes.
and apparently like the Velvet Underground documentary like enforces this, like the factory was not the best place for women, and I'm sure she was dealing with a lot, but it focuses on that, so it's like a super radical kind of ironic book. And then I just got this book, which I'm like, I need to put my books on the shelf, but I just got this book, which I'm sure that some people have seen or read. It's like very short as well, but I'm like, I literally was starting it this morning. I'm like on the second page, and it's about like trans femininity and a relationship to men in that context. And so I've heard amazing things about that book, so I'm going to recommend it before I read it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then we have our last question. Ruby asks, any strange / funny sexual awakenings you had as a kid from a movie or TV show?
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you one that I remembered like 2 weeks ago, and I wish I had remembered for the book, because I was trying to think about what those experiences were. It's not a movie or a TV show, but it's a game. I used to play this Flash game. It was like a Japanese anime game that was like, it was like the goal was, it was clearly made for like straight men. Like it was not meant for me to be playing it. But the goal was that you date this woman. You like bring her treats, and you like you like bring her roses, and she'd be like, I don't like these roses. And if she did like the roses, you would like bring her like lingerie, and like you would try to like win her over, and then eventually you got to like a sex scene. And I played this game for like literally like hours, like weekend after weekend, like it was on that website Albino Black Sheep, if you remember that from like internet day. I think you're too young to.
Yeah, I'm baby. I was like on Mini Clip and like Addicting Games and like all these other sketchy Japanese websites.
Yeah.
But I do recall games like that where they're like half naked animated women, and you have to like get them dressed and take them on dates and give them massages. And I'm like,
it was like, yeah, and I think
hell.
it was gross. It was totally gross. And I think then it's like that sets you up for this like queer contradiction of like, oh God, I don't want to be like fetishizing women, like, but I'm attracted to women. And that's like a whole, you know, thing that goes through all of our brains. And yeah.
Okay.
But that's probably it.
And then I have one last question for you. Before we say goodbye, what should I ask Tori Peters when I interview them?
Ooh, wow, that's hard. One question. I mean, I would ask Tori Peters to talk a bit about her obsession with divorced cis women, because she talks about this several times. The book is dedicated to divorced cis women, and I'm really interested in like hearing her just, I've read a few interviews with her where she's like talked about it and like kind of related that experience to the experience of being trans. But I would love to, like, if I were interviewing her, I would ask her about that for sure.
Okay, amazing. Definitely something to noodle on. Well, Jen, thank you so fucking much for coming to chat with us. I had a great time talking to you, and this will be put on our IGTV for you to send out if you ever want to.
Of course. Yes.
And it'll be shared with our community group as well. So yeah, just thank you. I so enjoyed reading your book. We so enjoyed talking about it over on Geneva, and hopefully you'll write another one when you're saved from the burnout and we can have you back.
The next one will be a novel, I believe. But oh, thank you guys so much. I shouldn't say guys, but thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for reading and for having me. It like means the world. It's amazing to be here. So thank you.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Have a great Saturday.
Yay. Bye.